Yo creo que estamos en directo. Ahora sí. Bueno, antes de todo, antes de empezar, os gustaría pedir disculpas porque hemos retrasado un montón. Hay 20 minutos de retraso. O sea que tuvimos un problema técnico en nuestros servidores. O sea que os pedimos perdón, pero ya está todo normalizado. Nuestro equipo de ingeniería estaba ahí como el bando de locos intentando arreglar todo el más rápido posible, ¿vale? Entonces, han logrado hasta todo funcionando perfectamente en Cambly otra vez. Y bueno, aquí estamos otra vez para hacer nuestras live sessions, nuestras Cambly Talks, no sé cómo decirlo, pero bueno, ya sabéis cómo funciona. Yo soy Tiago, encantado de estar aquí otra vez haciendo esta sesión. Os quería decir que aquí abajo os he dejado el link en la descripción de un descuento de hasta un 35%, ¿vale? Si queréis empezar, tomar una clase gratuita con este código que está aquí abajo, o empezar con una clase, empezar con el inglés, con un súper descuento, está aquí abajo, ¿vale? El link de la descripción. Y también hay el enlace de nuestro tutor de hoy, si quieres tomar una clase con él, hacer preguntas o bueno, lo que quiera preguntarnos, está ahí el enlace para tomar una clase con Gui, ¿vale? Y vamos a continuar lo que estábamos diciendo en la última sesión. O sea que vamos a hablar un poco más de la música, que no pudimos terminar en la última sesión, entonces vamos a terminar esta. A partir de ahora será todo en inglés, como ya sabéis, y cualquier duda, cualquier pregunta, poner aquí al lado y vamos hablando, ¿vale? So, now let's go to English. Let's switch. And so, Guy, how are you? First of all, I would like to say sorry for the delay. I know that you were kind of not understanding what was happening as well, but sorry for that. And as you already know, can you just explain a little bit about yourself and a little bit about you? Talk a little bit so for the ones who don't know us yet, so could understand a little bit more about you.
Right. Hello, Tiago. Thank you for having me once again. And no worries about the delay. You know, these technical problems happen. They come with technology. There's always, the chance of having some issues, but Cambly quickly resolved it, so that was great. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Gui Moraes. I'm a tutor here on Cambly, and I'm also a tattoo artist. I'm originally from Miami, and I graduated in fine arts, and I love teaching English and talking about different subjects like the arts, music, movies, sports, anything really. I'm just a very curious person, so I like having conversations about anything, even if I don't understand anything about it. But yeah, I'm very excited to be here again. So thank you.
That's nice. That's nice. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the music and in the United States. We talked in the last session. We talked a little bit about the rock and a little bit about hip hop, I think. And I noticed that a lot of people were asking, especially rock. I think we talked about a lot about rock. But I saw in last session that a lot of people were asking about country music and even some kind of pop as well. But I know that a lot of people asked about country music and some Latino kind of music as well. Especially, I don't know if you were listening to us right now. I think it was Gabriela who asked about the salsa in New York. It was something very interesting. So I would like even to start with this question from the last session. And we did a little bit, so for everybody who's watching us, we did a little bit like a small research about this question because we were both like, oh, interesting, like the salsa thing in New York, it's big enough or not. And we couldn't find a lot of history on that, but I mean, the Latino community, we all know that it's huge in the US. And we found out that it's actually like an international congress of salsa in New York. There's lots of places, pubs and bars and concerts and that you can find in New York, and I don't know if it's there in Miami as well. Can you talk a little bit about this Latino kind of music, and how they have the influence in the music in US as well?
Yeah, it has a huge influence, and like you mentioned, big Latin communities all throughout America. But of course, they are more heavily settled in the major cities like New York and Miami and LA. LA gets a lot of influence also from Mexico, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
it's, California is right above them.
Mm-hmm.
So in Florida and the East Coast gets a little more Latin influence from like Puerto Rico and Cuba and the Caribbean and also from South America. But really throughout all of United States, there are Latin communities, and it's very integrated into American culture.
Mm-hmm.
Even in places that isn't heavily populated by, let's say, a Latin American community, it is still already part of American culture, and it has always been because the United States has always been a place of immigrants. And
Mm-hmm.
from the early settlements, it was a lot of Irish communities and Dutch, English, people from all over Europe, and
Mm-hmm.
so there's people from everywhere, and that has always been a big part of American culture. And so the same with music.
Mm-hmm.
But in New York, there's a huge presence of Puerto Ricans and Cubans and all of other Latin cultures.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also a very cultural city, and it harvests like a lot of different shows and competitions and all these types of things. So it's not a coincidence that there is a lot of Latin music
Mm-hmm.
and that there is also like a big scene for it, because New York is one of those places where you can open a club about anything.
Yeah.
You can open any kind of store. You can do anything different, and people will kind of gravitate towards it. It's
Mm-hmm.
not a place where like you have to have all these standard types of businesses and clubs, or else there's not a crowd. People really like variety and
Mm-hmm.
new and different things.
Yeah.
And in Miami, there's a huge Latin community and a lot of salsa, and I love it. Salsa is such a fun rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
And I also went to school with a friend of mine. She was from Argentina, if I'm not mistaken. And she was a tango teacher, and she would go to like competitions. So I know there was like tango
Wow.
competitions in Miami as well. So yeah, very interesting and
Wow.
very fun rhythm to dance.
Yeah. Yeah, and those are kind of very difficult to dance actually, and it's that what you mentioned about New York, as we did one session as well. You guys can look into our sessions here that we talked about art in general. So, and Guy said that in New York, it's a place, as he said now, that's a place that you can open up everything. It's one of the best places to find art in the world, right? And that
Yeah,
comes to what you were saying before. It's like you can open everything. So if you want to open a bar for salsa or tango or whatever, you can definitely open it, and people will go.
sure. Yep, it's great. Yeah, I went to get a coffee once, and it was a coffee shop, I guess like a Starbucks or any kind of like coffee shop,
Mm-hmm.
but it had like games in there were like bookshelves in all the walls, and they were stored with all kinds of games. You could play Clue, you could play Game of Life, you could play Monopoly, you could play cards or chess or dominoes. It was
Mm-hmm.
just filled with games, and people would go there to drink coffee, and you could also play these board games. So it's like, wow, I don't know if that would work here, if people would really buy that idea, but there it works. Or you could
Yeah.
open like a record store and mix it with like hot dogs. You could
Uh-huh.
have the weirdest ideas, and people will be like, "Oh yeah, that's such a good idea. Let's go there." People are really into doing like something different every day because there's so many options. So
Mm-hmm.
every day you could do something different, and it's great. And music wise, it's the same. So you could go listen to jazz or bluegrass or rock and roll, hip hop, pop, Latin
Mm-hmm.
music, African rhythms. anything really. So New York is great for people who want to travel to a place and get a taste of a lot of different cultures and a wide variety of different things. Then you should go to New York, because you're going to visit one city and you're going to get a taste of the whole world.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
It is definitely like that. And it's a kind of a city that it's like, it is amazing.
Yeah.
Sometimes you feel
Never
kind
seen.
of lost, but I mean, if you really look through something, or especially like if you wanna into go into salsa, you will definitely find the biggest
Mhm.
congress in the world. You will find the huge and masses of bars and pubs that can offer and can go like concerts every day, and it's a, yeah, it's a city that you can find definitely anything that you want. Definitely.
Yeah,
Sometimes it
great.
even scares me. So just to think about the kinds of stuff that you can find in New York, but it's definitely true.
It's
Yeah.
intimidating. It's like a huge city for people who are from small towns and kind of the countryside. It is something intimidating.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're in Manhattan, you're walking around certain streets and you can't see the horizon. It's completely covered with skyscrapers, and the traffic is crazy. The rhythm of life, the pace is super fast.
Mm-hmm.
So it is kind of like, a little bit scary at first if you're not used to that big city environment.
Mm-hmm.
But once you get into rhythm, then it's great. It's really upbeat city. And I went to a pub called Fat Cat. It was like this underground bar. And once I went underground, there was this band playing jazz live, like just great instrumental jazz. There's a whole bar. Every table has like a chess board kind of stamped on it, so you could play chess or you could play checkers. And then in the back, there was like 10 ping pong tables with nets around them. So people are just playing ping pong. So there's people drinking, there's people dancing, there's people listening to the music, there's people just chatting, playing games, and there's people playing ping pong at like 2 in the morning while they're drinking. It's just insane. And I was like, oh my God, what is this place? And I'm sure that if you live there, you will find a place like this like every
Mm-hmm.
week.
Yeah.
It's just awesome.
And as we were talking about like New York, I think in New York you can find, musically speaking, I think it's all the big um, record labels. They are there, right? I think. I mean, the for example for hip hop, I think it's one of the biggest are there. It's the one that it's owned by Jay-Z. I think Jay-Z is from New York, so he's
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
all of his businesses are around there. So a lot of the music, especially hip hop, there's a lot in New York,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, New York is a big hub. I would say New York and like the West Coast, LA as well. A lot
Mm-hmm.
of history of Yeah, so the history of hip hop were kind of like brewed mostly in these two cities, like the West Coast and the East Coast
Mm-hmm.
rap. And so there's like big labels in both, and it's a big part of culture. But I
Mm-hmm.
would agree that's like probably the two main spots in the West, in like LA and in California in general. You also have like Hollywood, and you have a lot of industry about entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of movies and TV shows. So a lot of celebrities live there. There are like two cities where you just like people that kind of want to live in show business have to gravitate towards. And in
Mm-hmm.
New York is the same. There's like a lot of famous talk shows that happen there. Um,
Yeah.
just a lot going on. So I think you're right. A lot of record labels, a lot of shows. There's like big stages, like the Madison Garden.
Yeah. The
So a
Madison
lot of
Square.
great, musicians and entertainers go there. There's what else? Broadway. So there's like these cities that really draw show business. So
Mm-hmm.
if you're into dance or music or theater or art, then it's a
Yeah.
hub.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's like much more than Miami, for example, where you grew up.
It's at a larger scale. So in Miami, you can find all these things. There are some good theater companies. There are a few great museums in Miami. There's the PAM. There's the Bass Museum. There's the ICA. So there are some good museums in Miami. But it's just smaller. You know, it's
Yeah.
not as big as New York,
Hmm.
but you know, there's definitely like a music scene and art scene, and you know, there's like theater. But New York is just a giant, you know, and California as well.
Hmm. Okay.
You know,
Okay. So now I would like to switch the I mean the music as we're talking, because a lot of I know that a lot of people asked us in the last session, and it's about the country music, because it's huge in the US. Sometimes like there are super famous musicians that they play country music, but they are just famous in the US and so little outside the US. But it's a
right?
huge thing. And do you know a little bit about country music? What can you? Because I remember one of the questions here. I'm just looking through a few of the questions that from the last session, and I found one that is from Mariano, and he was like, what about country music like Lucky Combs and the Dad South? The Dad South is pretty good. I really like it, and Lucky Combs as well. Like they're huge. And what are your thoughts about that?
Country music is very interesting. I didn't get that much exposure to it growing up, so it's not like a natural genre of music for me.
Mm-hmm.
Natural, I mean that I grew up listening to, you know, and it's something very familiar. To me, it's a little like exotic
Mm-hmm.
because it's something that I kind of started finding out and learning about later.
Hmm.
And it's super popular, like you said, in the United States. It's one of those genres of music that really depict life and talk about like lifestyle, you know, and hardships of life and emotions that we go through. So it's very kind of storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the reasons for that is because in the origins of country music in the early 20th century, was a lot about sitting around the fire and telling stories, right? And
Mm.
talking about, you know, the different hardships of it is that living in the countryside. It's called country for a reason, right? These people lived in the
Mm-hmm.
countryside. It was very much like a farm kind of lifestyle, a lifestyle that is very grounded in like dealing with the earth. It's like a very naturalistic type of life.
Mm-hmm.
And it had a lot of influence from like Celtic and Irish music from immigrants who would come to the United States and settle in those countryside towns as well. And that's why you hear a lot of like instruments that kind of were incorporated from Celtic music, like the fiddle, you know. So that is
Mm.
very interesting. And then they started also adapting like some other instruments of folk music. And you know, the banjo is very popular in country music, and you have like this sort of polyrhythmic aspect to it, which is also kind of a fusion of, you know, other songs that were coming up at the time in America, like the blues, but with this European influence of folk music. And that kind of started developing what is country. And then there's like Southern rock, which is then country kind of mixing with rock and roll. So all these genres of music, they start mixing with each other and creating these subtypes of music. It's very interesting. Yeah.
Mm.
It's huge. A lot of huge um, artists are in the country, and I think they don't get that much exposure outside, maybe unless they
Mm-hmm.
kind of start going more towards the pop. Because pop, I guess, is what is popular. It's what
Mm-hmm.
is, I think, easier to package and sell to a
Yeah.
larger audience.
Yeah.
So then you have like the Taylor Swifts and, you know, the other artists who kind of gravitate from country and they start becoming more mainstream, a little more
Mm.
pop. So it's a little easier to digest, and I guess you could play more in parties. You know, it starts like kind of adapting itself to pop music.
Mm-hmm.
Those artists they get known outside. But that was a very good question. So thank you, Mariano, right, for
Yeah,
sending
Mariano.
the question. Yeah, thanks for participating. Everyone who's watching, send your questions. We love it.
Yeah, that's nice because I mean it's definitely something. I completely forgot that Taylor Swift. It's actually she was born, let's say like that, into the country music. That's right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
And
it's
yeah,
true.
and now she's one of the like the biggest. From she went from like the 2 years in a row, like in the highest paid singer in the world, something like that. So it's kind of huge how how
Exactly.
she went from a
Yeah,
country girl from I don't know where she was from Nashville probably or something like that. And
probably. Yeah, I don't know her biography, but yeah, it's interesting how like the major artists, I guess they somehow start gravitating more towards pop
mhm,
from whatever it is that they were doing before. And a lot of times you are kind of surprised to know that in their background, maybe they were doing something quite different, you know.
mhm,
I know Lady Gaga is like a great composer and she plays the piano. And now we all know that because she's exposed that side of her through like documentaries and movies. But when she kind of blew up as a pop star, no one really knew this very like artistic kind of side to her. I think like she
mhm.
went to art school, things like that. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I
I don't.
think she started. Yeah, even like yeah, as you're saying, like Lady Gaga is one of the like, few examples of like huge pop music in the U.S. The
Yeah,
but I mean yes, definitely. And
yeah.
in terms
Go
of
ahead.
country in the country music, I would say there's one of the guys from that show, The Voice. The Voice.
The voice.
Yeah, who?
Yeah.
What is the name of that guy? I think one of the
I don't
one
know.
of
I
the.
forgot his name right now, but he's very famous. Can't
Yeah,
believe I
he's
forgot
one
his
of.
name.
I would definitely research here. Just see because anyone knows who's watching us here. Anyone knows of the name of the judge from the Voice US.
Blake.
He's
Blake Shelton.
Blake
Yeah.
Shelton. That's right, and he's from country music as well, right? So he was
Yeah. Yeah.
basically that.
Very famous. Yeah.
And
So there's a lot of famous guys, and Blake is huge.
but Blake is one of those guys that he was extremely famous in the US, but before The Voice, he was just famous in the US. Now he's famous all over the
Right.
world.
Yeah, because I think the music that gets like sold outside of the U.S. is mostly like hip hop and pop, like these kind of like genres of music that are more popular with the young generations. And I think that's the same for any country, not just the US. Like if you hear from Brazil, the music that actually makes outside is they kind of have to change from whatever they started with to make it more pop. And from any other country, you take like Shakira, you know, when she started in Colombia, she kind of like started singing in English and becoming more and more pop
Hmm.
until she blew up. But then pop is a weird term because pop is whatever is popular in my understanding. I'm not saying
Hmm.
this is the rule.
Yeah.
But then like in America, like maybe like 10 years ago or something, there started to be a very huge influence and presence of reggaeton.
Hmm.
And nowadays, I guess you could consider reggaeton pop, you know.
Yeah. Basically, yeah.
It's not exactly like pop, the style of dance music pop that we kind of got used to, like Madonna. You
Uh-huh.
know, I think that would be like Madonna, the Michael Jackson. That would be like the definitions of pop,
Hmm.
you know, historically. And then you have like Backstreet Boys and Spice Girls, like after Britney Spears. These are like the definitions of pop
Uh-huh.
to us, right? Um, but
That's
I
true.
guess nowadays, like these styles of music are kind of pop, you
Hmm.
know, like reggaeton and even like trap rap music, you know,
Hmm.
like the SoundCloud rappers. This is very much trendy. It's like
Yeah.
what you hear the most.
Yeah.
So
I think
pop
it's.
music can change and it can adapt, and whatever is super
Mhm.
popular at the time, it kind of it takes from that and it borrows from that, you know. So
Yeah.
it's hard
Definitely.
to find.
Definitely. I think I couldn't agree more with you in that because it's definitely different when you sometimes we as we were talking in the last session about when he was teaching my brother on Cambly, and he asked about, my brother is 18 now, and he was asking what his favorite 5 artists, top 5. And if you go into like Spotify nowadays or YouTube, the ones that you can see like the most views, like hundreds of millions of views, are even sometimes artists that I don't even know. Some of those I mean, it was like, okay, who's this guy? And he had like
Right.
130 million views in one song. I was like, wow, that's it's something completely out of this world, and it's an industry that's completely changing, as you were saying. Reggaeton
Yeah.
today, and you see like the reggaeton guys are the highest paid artists. Like the hip hop and the reggaeton guys are the highest paid artists in the world right now. They are like making concerts for thousands and thousands of people, and it was like, okay, what is happening? Who is this guy? Like, I don't know who
Yeah. Remember, like when Despacito came out,
he.
that was
Yeah.
like biggest song in the world.
Yes.
So I guess, is that reggaeton? Is that pop?
Mm-hmm.
It's like hard to say.
Yeah.
I guess both, maybe. It's one and the other. But those genres are like very famous. And yeah, and the thing you said about the SoundCloud or Spotify nowadays is it's hard to keep up. There's so many
Yeah.
artists. What I think happens nowadays is you have a lot more available, and there's a lot more competition between musicians because anyone can record a song at home. Right here on this laptop that I'm talking to you,
Mm-hmm.
I could record a song and use GarageBand or some other software and make a
Yeah.
beat, and then I could make a video with my iPhone that has a great camera. Then by tomorrow, it's on YouTube,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
then a very famous artist or producer could come by my music, come across it somehow, really like it, and then tweet it. And then boom, it blows up. So it's all about being viral nowadays, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not even
Yeah.
about being great, about being viral. Like
Yeah.
what's sketchy and what goes viral.
Mm-hmm.
And then whatever goes viral just propagates itself until it reaches everybody. But then it has a very short lifespan as well.
Mm-hmm.
So artists that have a career like Madonna, like Michael Jackson, the people that we talked about, like the great bands from back in the day, I think it's kind of fizzling out. Now the careers are kind of like 3 years long.
Mm-hmm.
You have like one huge hit, then you try to back it up with another hit, and then
Yeah.
maybe you come out with an album, and then maybe your second album is not so great anymore. Or it's not even that it's not so great; it's because there's so much new music every day
Yeah.
that you just release an album now. By the time you release the next album next year, I've already got into another 100 artists
Mm-hmm.
that now I'm into. So like, yeah, maybe you come out with a new album and it's great, and I start listening to you again. Of course, there are artists who have been doing it. It's not every artist that has a short career like
Yes.
that, but the majority that we see, these viral songs, they don't last that long.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
It's like a summer hit or something.
And it comes to, I just received an interesting question here from Javier. And he has two interesting questions actually, but one it's very into what we were talking about right now. And he's asked, well, do you think reggaeton is music or even trap? So that's an interesting question.
Yeah, that's deep.
Yeah, that's kind of deep. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. You want to start?
What is music? Right. Music has a rhythm. Music is a combination of sounds that embody some type of rhythm and some type of harmony. That's how I would classify music, like the very bone structure. And then you could have a melody, and you could have more and more complex music. So it is music. Is it musical? Is it like is what is the intention of these songs? Is it to be very musical, to use crazy chord progressions and interesting melodies and scales and amazing instruments and have a progressive structure? I don't think so. I think the function is more for sending a message or for pure entertainment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just for people to dance to at the party.
Yeah.
Is that bad? Is that good? That depends on each one's preference. But it's definitely music.
Uh-huh.
Is it good music? Is it interesting music? Then depends on whoever's listening to it.
Yeah.
But I consider it music. Yeah.
Depends
How about you?
on your mood as well. I think sometimes
Yeah, of
you're
course.
on the body. You don't want to listen to some very progressive jazz music or something like that. You just want to something
Yeah.
that you can dance or something that you can. I mean, just listen to it and dance a little bit. So yeah, it's
Right. Exactly.
definitely something deep in this question. Thanks for asking, Javier. It's something that it's definitely
It's great. It's
worth
great. Yeah.
discussing because as you, I consider it as music as well. It's something that if we put it a song and sometimes we listen to it, it's there's some kind of at least a few words that we can get stuck in our head sometimes, and it's definitely
Yeah.
a kind of a music, yeah. But it's
Yeah. It is music. But like I said, music. There's like it's a big umbrella that fits a lot of different fields, just like art and like almost anything else. And what is the purpose of each one of these fields? So there's going to be the purpose that is to set a mood, like you said.
mm-hmm.
And that mood could be a party mood, it could be studying mood, it could be something about introspection, right? You're thinking about life and you're thinking about, I don't know, you're just looking inside. So that could be like a mantra kind of, song, like very Eastern. It could be something that is trying to further extend our knowledge of music. So then you have like symphonies and you have Mozart, right? You have like these great composers who are trying to extend the limits and barriers of what we can create with compositions.
Mm-hmm.
So there are different purposes, different functions. It's all music, but yeah, I don't think a trap artist is really trying to expand the fabrics of music theory. He's just trying to make a beat and get people hyped to whatever he's singing. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
It's
different functions.
yeah, it's I was watching a documentary. I don't know if it was a document. I don't remember, but it was from with Jay-Z, and he was asking. Actually, the guy asked him about why you were not putting so much songs out now, as everybody's putting like a song a week or something like that. And he said something very interesting. I was like, oh, that's quite nice. I always kept thinking, wow, this guy's so mature right now in his life. I was like, okay,
He's a smart guy, yeah.
yeah. And he was like, I'm not making music for the few months. I want to make music that lasts forever. I was like, whoa. So
Yeah,
he was
tough.
definitely into that. I'm not going to make a song a week. I will do it a song every 3 months, something like that, because I want something that
Right.
has a history, has something more. And he's definitely doing that. Probably he's the richest guy on the hip hop right now. He's definitely doing some great things. So
Yeah.
that's
I
similar
thought
what
that.
you were talking right now. Yeah.
Yeah, so he has an intention, and I think it's very honorable. And I just don't know if it works like that. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, you could have your intention and do your best to
Yeah.
to accomplish that, but I just think it's the overall context and industry. I don't know if it allows it for a song to live forever anymore.
Yes.
I mean, of course it could, but I don't know if that's just upon the artist anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's kind of almost out of the artist's hands in a way. You know,
Yeah.
the best way to make a song live forever now is to make something super catchy like Despacito.
Mm-hmm.
And even if it's not a good song in 10 years, even if it becomes a joke, people will remember it
Yeah.
because it went viral and it kind of marked a summer or like a decade or something.
Mm-hmm.
Now to make a serious piece of art, music, song that stands the test of time, like I don't know, we can think of some other great songs, like Another
Some
Brick in the Wall or
yeah.
Black Dog from Zeppelin or
Oh, okay.
Stairway to Heaven or You can go into other genres,
Bohemian
right?
Rhapsody.
Bohemian Rhapsody, or like changes from Tupac, or like Juice from Big, to stick with hip hop. Or you can go to any genre, like some great, Leonard Skinner songs. They're kind of like southern rock, country.
Mm-hmm.
You can go into any type of genre.
Mm-hmm.
To make that today, I think it's very difficult, and not because artists aren't capable, but because there's too much going on. And for a song to really cement itself that way, it kind of almost needs an exclusive universe for itself.
Mm-hmm.
So think about this. I was talking to my dad the other day. My dad is a huge Led Zeppelin fan, right? Grew up listening to Zeppelin,
mm-hmm.
which brings another interesting conversation we could have later. So he said that he went on a surf trip with his cousin to Ubatuba to surf some good waves in Brazil. And he said that he drove, it's like a 5-hour drive, 6-hour drive, something like that. And this was like in the 70s,
Mm-hmm.
80s. And he took the car with his cousin, and there were cassette tapes at the time. No internet was invented. No CDs were invented. Cassette tapes were like the latest technology. And he said that a friend of his from university had gotten the new Led Zeppelin album. Okay, I think number 4. And he was able to copy it into a tape from the record, right? So the tape was like a recording of the original record.
Uh-huh.
And he went on this surf trip for like 2 weeks, and that's the only tape he had. Now imagine this is just my dad, and it's a cool story. But this was the reality for so many people. You didn't have Spotify. You didn't have YouTube. You didn't have these platforms, iTunes, with a billion songs at any second, and you can just skip a song. The cassette tape, you couldn't skip songs. You had to listen through the whole cassette.
Yeah.
And that's why when he listens to Zeppelin, it's like, wow, this marked my life.
Mm-hmm.
Because it wasn't just a surf trip. It was probably the whole year he listened to that cassette. And then he listened to the Stones cassette and the Beatles cassette and the Jimi Hendrix cassette. Sure, it wasn't just Zeppelin. But for that 2 weeks, he only heard one album.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I play that album today, I see it in his face. It's like, wow, he's back driving, going surfing in Ubatuba,
Mm-hmm.
That's what I mean. Like, if Led Zeppelin made that album today, will it have the same space for people to really, wow, this is amazing and unique? And it wouldn't, it would still be amazing, but it wouldn't have the same space and time
to go deep into the song, right? It's something
exactly. And so it's a whole different world. So I'm not saying Jay-Z can't make a song that lasts forever. He's made many. I listened to a lot of great Jay-Z songs, and it was the early hip hop where internet wasn't even really that well established. It was really hard to download music.
Mm-hmm.
So I had Jay-Z CDs, and to me, they cemented in my mind, But nowadays, it's hard to do that. And the way that you can do that is if you go viral. And to go viral, it's not really the best, greatest song ever. It's something catchy that blows up.
Yeah.
So the whole industry is completely different,
Mm-hmm.
And something interesting I was hearing the other day, and I think it was Kanye West was speaking that, not the other day, that was a while ago, on a TV show, or it was a radio show. He was being interviewed, and they were asking him about how to stay relevant as an artist today. And his whole answer was super interesting, but something he said was, it used to be that musicians did shows so they could showcase their music and sell albums.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's how the revenue came for a musician. It was selling albums.
Yeah.
That's where your money came from. That's what supported you as an artist.
Yeah.
That culture is gone. No one buys albums anymore. It's all streamed. No one hardly pays for music. So now you make albums to sell shows. It's the opposite. And that's how you make music. or you sell albums to make shows and get into advertising, right? So it's not really your song that makes you money as an artist. Now it's your
It's a lifestyle,
entertainment business. It's the shows, it's the movie, it's the TV, it's the commercial that they use your song in, right? So it's completely different as well.
Yeah.
So music itself is a completely different experience nowadays.
Definitely, it's true. And it comes through another question that it's interesting from the same one that asked about the if the reggaeton is music. It comes from Javier. There's two interesting questions that are both kind of connected. And he asked about why rock bands are getting less popular. And Luana, she asked about why do you think American music is so popular? And I think it's kind of connected because in some way it depends on how much money you invest on it as well, and how much money you're. I mean, as you're saying in the pop music, what is popular right now or not, and how much money those guys are spending to become to have this lifestyle that is selling on social media as well. So I think both are connected because rock's kind of a niche right now. That there's a lot of people who are still like I still listen to a lot of rock music, and but it's kind of I don't know. Sometimes we get the sense of it's getting less popular because the ones that is so popular right now, they're making shows that are like 100 times bigger than the ones where the rock musicians are doing. And I don't know. It's something. What do you think of on that? And then we can go into why do you think American music is so popular? Because I think have a few interesting questions as well. But I think why rock bands are getting less popular is interesting for us to start now.
Definitely. Great question. So my first thought is that it's history. At some point, rock and roll was the new thing. And it was a rebel movement in a way, So it was counterculture. It was defying the edge of music. Distorted guitar, is that even music? So the same way he asked trap music, is that even music? The people who were first listening a distorted guitar sound were like, oh, what is that noise? Is that even music? Because before that, the guitar was used in blues, right? Yeah. And blues is very clean. And now it's suddenly like fuzzy sound, Jimi Hendrix, right? It's like, wow, what is that? It just sounds like scraping metal or something. And so it became the new thing, and people really bonded and gravitated towards it because of the movements that were happening at the time were pushing that kind of new, defying music forward. It was a time where people were fighting for like personal expression and freedom. You have like the movements of Woodstock. There's like so much going on at that time that made a big space for rock and roll to thrive. And the expansion of the electrical instruments, what can be done, effects pedals, that's kind of us making the craziest electronic music today because we have this new technology. At the time, that's what rock and roll did, but with analog technology, right? Using resistors and transistors. It's like, wow, we can make these tiny little metal boxes that if you step on it, now the sound repeats itself. It's a delay pedal. Oh, and then we can make this other circuit that if you step on it, now the guitar just sounds very harsh and distorted. Wow, we created a distortion pedal. So historically, rock and roll at some point was like the avant-garde music. It was pushing music forward. But now rock and roll, if we're talking about Woodstock as like the pinnacle point of rock and roll, of classic rock, that was in '69. How many years ago is that? Like 50 years ago?
Yeah.
So now we have other musics that are, pushing music forward. Even if we don't think it's music, even if we don't like it, and so that's my first thought is that, rock and roll had its boom because it was the new thing. Like hip hop had a boom because it was a new thing. how reggaeton's having a boom because it's the new thing, and trap music, right? So that's my first instinct. The second one is because we have these all new rhythms who are popular and are kind of fighting for people's attentions. Rock and roll has to split and fight for a spotlight amongst all these other rhythms that are very popular. And why are these rhythms very popular? I think because there are new rhythms that, life and society moves forward and changes. Culture is always changing. Electronic music came with the advancements of electronic instruments. So naturally, they're going to become something interesting, and people are going to push that forward. So we have pop, and then, so the three components. One is history. The second one is because there's an abundance of other music that is popular today. And the third aspect is because I think people are getting lazy in a certain way, where we don't really want to have to digest music. We kind of just want something catchy to be in the background, or something that it's entertaining.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of rock and roll, like Stairway to Heaven, is like a 7-minute and 45-second song that kind of takes you through a journey, and it has ups and downs and crescendos and descendos and a guitar solo, and it's something that really makes you emotional. I think as a society, we're losing our attention span, and a 8-minute song can't really compete with 15-second TikTok videos. How many of those can we watch in the 8 minutes that we listen to one song? People usually don't even listen to a whole song, and the average song is 3 minutes long nowadays. So it's just the way that we consume music is different. The new music that is pushing the edges of genres of music is different, and rock and roll has kind of become, there is still rock and roll. We just don't receive it that much because of that first reason. So I hope I did my best to explain my views, my thoughts on it.
Yeah. No,
And
but I mean,
if anyone watching us and you disagree, let us know. Give us your opinion. We're not experts.
Definitely. But I mean, it's something that you were saying. I was thinking about. For example, now there's a few new rock bands, like for example, the 30 Seconds to Mars, and he adapts a little bit of the pop of the way that the people are selling music to the rock as well. So it's an adaptation.
Yeah.
It's it's
rock
something.
and roll itself evolved crazy, right? Rock and roll has a crazy history of change. So we go from classic rock of like Hendrix and Cream and Clapton, which was still very grounded in blues. And then we started getting into like more kind of metal rock, and even like 80s hair bands, like Scorpions and like Poison, and we have like Guns N' Roses. It's a completely different music style from Hendrix already. And then we get into like even more metal songs. We have like Slipknot, And then there was a phase in the 90s where the guitar solo got removed from the rock and roll. We have like Limp Bizkit, and we have Korn, right? We have Linkin Park. So these are still rock and roll songs, but they are kind of more in the pop field, right? There's no more guitar solo. It has the attitude of rock. It has the distortion and the instruments of rock and roll, but it's following kind of the same structure as like a pop song or a rap song, of a chorus, a riff, a chorus, a riff, right? So rock and roll itself kind of evolved. And then the funny thing is, exactly like you mentioned, there was a great band that was coming up in these last years. I don't know how they're doing now, called Zeta Grand Fleet. They're like these very young kids. They play amazing classic rock. And a lot of people hated on them and criticized them because they said, well, they sound just like Led Zeppelin and they dress like the classic rock. They're just a copy. And then I think it's funny because the same people that complain that rock and roll doesn't exist anymore, when there is something that resembles that classic rock comes up, we're kind of like, oh, no, they're just copying the classic rock. Well, which one is it? Do you miss classic rock? Or is it good that there's a new band playing classic rock? Or is it a copy so it's bad? Make up your mind. So maybe like we don't even give a chance to these new bands because we kind of compare them with history. It's like, oh, you're just copying Hendrix. Well, great. Why not copy Hendrix? Hendrix was amazing. Copy him, right? because Hendrix was copying other people. You know,
Yeah.
Hendrix all along the Watchtower, one of his favorite, highest songs, most known, is a Bob Dylan song.
Mm-hmm.
You have Led Zeppelin songs; they are all based in their covers of old blues songs.
Mm-hmm.
So those people were copying. Music is all about copying.
Yeah.
But I think like there's a big like criticism and judgment on these rock and roll bands nowadays. So the only way that they can get a chance because of that and because of the music industry and because of people's attention span is if they make these kind of pop rock songs.
Mm-hmm.
So then you have like a Maroon 5, right? Big rock and roll band.
Mm-hmm.
Very different
Yeah.
than, you know, like classic rock or like metal rock or previous rock. So it is a metal band or a rock and roll band, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we still have some that play in the circuit, but they're already kind of getting old, like Red Hot Chili Peppers and the Foo Fighters, you know, Pearl Jam.
Mm-hmm.
These bands aren't, you know.
Yeah.
They're still, but they're still popular with the young crowd. So I guess because they played the big festivals and they're just very famous.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's true. That's true. Yeah.
And then why does American music get popular? I think everything American gets popular in the world because America kind of became like this huge cultural center,
mm-hmm.
right? Especially after the Second World War, there was a big push in the arts movement. We talked about that before, and how United States really wanted to make the American lifestyle kind of a model for the rest of the world. And Hollywood was a way to kind of sponsor and showcase the American lifestyle to the rest of the world to show
mm-hmm.
how great American lifestyle was. You know, it wasn't just like chance. Mm-hmm. That was kind of constructed, and that's the reason that the whole world consumes American entertainment, and it kind of became a standard for movies. You have Hollywood, for music, for fine arts, for dance. You have Broadway for theater. So I think that's why. And then the English language kind of became the language in which all these entertainments were broadcast. So it's a very familiar language.
Mm-hmm.
And because they have great artists as well and a great infrastructure in marketing so that these things can work and be developed, right? So there's a huge industry in all these sectors that work. So I think it's a combination of all those.
Yeah, and there is something that I was reading another day as well. It's something that it was like the top 100 artists or something like that into the Billboard's list. The top 100 artists, they produce their music with like five producers. So 5 producers are like managing all of the music of these top 100 artists, and it's because they realize that music has some kind of algorithm that if you apply this algorithm in the lyrics and the performance and all those that, you definitely have your way to get your music. I would not say the viral because it depends of the artist as well, the lifestyle that they present as well, but it works because if just like 5 major producers are managing the top 100 artists in the world, it's because it's working in a way. I don't know if it's good or bad, but it was something that it was definitely came to my mind, and it's another way, as you were saying, because of the marketing infrastructure, the whole industry infrastructure. I think one of the main things that in the U.S. they're so good is about selling their culture. It's the U.S. It's huge on that. The Hollywood was built on that, as you were saying, and they know how to sell stuff, and they know to become worldwide artists so quickly. And it's definitely, I don't know. It's when I was reading these, especially these articles talking about these 5 producers that were. It was like managing all those 100 top artists. I was like, wow, this is huge. So that could be one of the reasons as well, right?
Yeah, you have like Rick Rubin, who's a huge producer. He's produced like Beastie Boys to Metallica to anything that you ever heard. Mm-hmm. So yeah, and it's the same here in Brazil. There's like one or not one or two, maybe 5 And it's a combination of things. It's these producers who kind of managed or figured out these algorithms, or they're sometimes just great at hearing a band play their own material, and they're good at finding ways. I guess you can call that your algorithm of rearranging those songs and making a structure that is compelling, and it's also digestible by the public, right? So they're kind of like great basketball coaches. They get like great players. They get the LeBron James and they get Davis and they get these amazing players, and they're very good at orchestrating that to make it the best version of that team possible. That's the producer's job.
Yeah.
So at the same time that they are great at that, they for being great at that, they probably work at great recording studios as well, and with great publishers. So the same way that they're producing all these people are getting very famous because they're working with him. And because since they're working with him, they're probably getting opportunities at these big labels and publishers. And if they're getting opportunities at these big labels and publishers, they're getting airtime, they're getting TV time, they're getting a lot of money funded for advertising their own material. They're getting sponsored, to do a lot of shows and tours around America. So it's not just the producer. The producer is one component, but it's the industry, like you said, right? So I completely agree with you, and it is very fascinating.
Yes.
And like you said, United States, it became so proficient at showcasing the American lifestyle, like I said, the American dream. And like I said, that came especially after Second World War. United States saved the world. That's how they see it, right? So we came in there and we saved the world from Nazi and from communism and from other threats. So now we're the greatest country in the world. And we need to showcase that to the rest of the world, because there was still a threat of communism big in the world. Soviet Union was still around. And I'm not saying communism is bad or good, but I'm saying from the point of view of the American politics at the time, we need to showcase that capitalism and the American way of life is the greatest in the world. And look how great we live, and look at our inventions, and look at our arts, and we're going to send people to the moon. It was a whole plethora of things that United States started doing to really showcase to the rest of the world how advanced in technology and culture and arts and education and entertainment, science, everything. Look at how great we are. And they really push that forward in movies and in music, entertainment, in the space race, right? In everything. In sports. You look at every Olympics every 4 years, who's the number one medalist in the world?
Yeah.
And it's ridiculous the amount of medals they get. They're like number one by far. And usually number two is like Russia or China.
Yeah.
And China has like 1.2 billion people. America has like 300 million. So it's like a quarter of the people.
Yeah.
But look at their infrastructure for sports and athletes. It's amazing. So they really fomented that, and it became popular all over the world. They're very good at showcasing their lifestyle and marketing and pushing that out.
Yeah.
And now it kind of just became the standard. So things naturally already go to the rest of the world. They don't really have to push it so much, because the standard of culture nowadays is American TV shows, American productions, American music. And I think with the internet, it's starting to change a little bit, to where I think Bollywood, Spain is coming out with a lot of TV shows. Like when I go on Netflix here, there's a lot of shows from Spain. Casa de Papel was a huge hit all over the world.
Yeah.
So other countries are starting to show that, hey, look, we have great entertainment too. And they're starting to sip in there, which is amazing, right?
Yeah. Definitely.
The United States still kind of holds that top reference into anything that has to do with entertaining. So, yeah.
That's true. So I would like to finish with one more question that we received here. And if I'm not wrong, it's from the same girl that asked us about the Southend last session. I don't know, Gabriela, if it's you, just put the thumbs up here and say so hello as well. And she asked us something very interesting. And she wrote that. Can you tell us a little bit about music, like folklore in the USA? It's common here. It's uncommon here about music folklore in the USA. I'm pronouncing correctly. Folklore, folklore.
Yeah, folklore or folk music is, from my understanding, it's now there's a genre of that. So it recreates that type of music, right? So there's like a lot of artists that make new songs. So it's their songs, right? For sure. Their compositions that are in this style. But how it came about, anything folklore is kind of things that are passed generation by generation, right? By
Mm-hmm.
storytelling, by showing the youngs how to play it, or it's like there's really not an author. There are these things that no one really know where they came from and how they started. They're just songs that whoever started singing them, and as generations and generations went by, they were passed to the next one, and kids would learn it, and then they would sing it, and their kids would learn it, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe it would change a little bit. Maybe they
Mm-hmm.
forgot a part, and that's folklore in general, telling tales, fables. These are like stories that kind of became over time,
Mm-hmm.
and it usually tells stories. So there's a lot of storytelling, and there's usually a message behind that story, right? And this is why fables and folklore music were kind of invented. They were invented kind of to remember things and to tell stories about things in the past and to kind of teach lessons to their young. And um, so there's a lot of like instruments, depending on the culture where you come from, there will be different instruments incorporated.
Mm-hmm.
So, but a lot of like, I don't know. I don't really know about the instruments that much. I think of like banjos and acoustic 12-string guitars, like flute, these kind of like folky instruments that were kind of like common for people to play in villages, things like that,
Mm-hmm.
things that were around.
Even the harm,
Um,
as you were saying before, the harm, it's one as well.
the harmonica is very famous, yeah. And then later it was introduced the harp into blues.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so like kind of easy instruments that you could play around the fire, or you could play at a gathering at your house,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of storytelling, um, and also music that people could dance to, and
Yeah.
so it had a rhythm. Folk music has a rhythm. It's very interesting.
Um,
A good question. And
that's
I'm not
nice.
an expert on folk music. I did my best to
That's nice.
to
That's
give my
nice.
view.
But I mean, it was amazing, and I just I saw here a comment that I definitely want to share it with you because I think you will be happy. And Luana, she just wrote it like, "Thank you guys. I agree. The way we consume music has changed, and our standards as well." And she put it, "Loves the new hairstyle, by the way." So,
All right, thumbs up. Uh, Hairstyle does its own thing. I don't really choose. Sorry.
that's good. That's good. But it's as you already know, it's making you becoming famous in the music in the Cambly session, Cambly
I don't know
talks.
how long it will last, because it is kind of wild. But that's how I woke up today, or after the shower. I dried it off, and it dried this way, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna go with it. I'm feeling hip hop today. Bring the afro.
That's
So
nice.
yeah,
That's nice.
thank you very much for the compliment.
So that's
Funny.
nice. So guys, thank you very much for your time here. And sorry one more time for the delay in the beginning. It was, I mean, yeah, and it was not a fault, but thankfully our engineers were like working as crazy and fixed the problem very fast. And I hope you guys have a great weekend. And as I said here in the description, I put the link for a 35% discount. Okay, this link it will be live just for a few hours. It just works while we were watching the live, and it will be live a few hours before. And if you want to have a class with Guy and just talk about music or arts or whatever thing, we just put his link here in the description as well, so you can definitely look for him, click on the link, send him a message, and have a class with him. And I would say, yeah, thank you, Guy, one more time for having us here. And would you like to finish with something? Would you like to say something for us?
Sure. Again, thank you very much, Thiago and Cambly, for having me here once again. I love doing these conversations and these live talks with you. And thank you for people at home watching us and for participating. Your questions were great. I would like to ask everyone at home to like the video, to subscribe, to share, all the good stuff. And also to click on the link that Cambly is giving you guys. It's a great discount. And I would really love if all of you could come have a class with me. And you could ask me questions about music, the things that we discussed. If you think that I was wrong about anything, or you would like to give me your opinion about the questions we talked about, I would love to know. So click the link and come schedule a class with me. And yeah, have a great evening, everybody. Thank you, Thiago.
All right, that's good. So guys, thank you very much. And so I just saw Jessica. If you wanna, Jessica just put it. I want you to learn to speak English. So definitely, I was learning to speak English. I would just switch to Spanish just to say that to her. Jessica, si quieres aprender inglés, tienes que hacer clic aquí en este enlace abajo. Tenéis un descuento especial. Tenéis también una clase gratuita al principio, ¿vale? Entonces puedes empezar, puedes hacer un test en la plataforma, puedes hacer un test en Cambly, tomar una clase con Guy y tienes que hablar. Yo empecé a hablar inglés, hablando con nativos. Yo viví en California, entonces no sabía muchas cosas, tenía que hablar. Y al final ha sido así, ha sido poco a poco aprendiendo y hablando con la gente. Entonces es lo mejor que tienes que hacer, ¿vale? Hablar con nativos. Entonces, si quieres, haga clic aquí en este enlace y bueno, vamos a por ellos, ¿vale? So, thank you guys very much. We're going to see you guys next week one more time. If you have any idea, like put the like, subscribe, put some comments. If you have any idea about something that you want to hear, want us to talk about, just make sure to put the comments here and we will do our best to answer you. So Guy, thank you very much for your time one more time, and see you guys next week. So bye bye guys, see you.
Take care.